Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I'm hoping you're having a great morning. My name is Cherie, and I'm actually the CEO of Secure Solutions Group, but also the editor at the Birthday Collective. And I'm really, really happy to be moderating this morning's panel on citizen-centric innovation. I have with me three panelists. But before I do that, I would like to just kind of share a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. The world that we live in is rapidly going digital, including in the public service. And really, we're here to discuss how the public sector leaders can address this diversity and these needs across all the demographics, and to ensure that innovation is still human-centric and better for everybody. So I have with me, first up, I have Bruce Liew, Director of Sector Digitalisation and Transformation Office at the National Council of Social Service Singapore.
Hello.
Say hi.
Hi.
And then I also have Mohamed Hardi, Director and Chief Information Officer at the National Heritage Board, Singapore.
Hey, hi guys.
And finally, Malcolm Koh, Director, CX Practice, Experience Practice, Global Customer Engagement at Zendesk.
Everybody.
Okay, cool. I'm just gonna dive right in. I was talking to the three gentlemen before we launched, and we were part of a really interesting conversation. But gentlemen, let me just ask you. I mean, I cannot not talk about COVID. I know you guys must have heard that to death, but I have to start with that. How has the pandemic actually shaped this idea of citizen-centric services? What does it mean before the pandemic, and what does it mean today for us? We'll go in alphabetical order first. So Bruce.
Okay, thanks, Cherie. So yes, we can't go without talking about pandemic. So clearly, as you can see, right? I mean, one of the things that happened in the past year is really shifting of social services online. I think traditionally you imagine that even the likes of counseling and delivering of food and all, it's a very high touch, face-to-face kind of interaction. But with the circuit breaker and with all the safe measurements, measures and all that, it prohibits a lot of these things. And so the flip side of that is, of course, even while social service agencies have pivoted and shifted some of their services online, we've also seen a shift in the target audience that they have been engaging with. So just case in point, one of the social service agencies or SSAs called WeCare, right? When circuit breaker hit, they were one of the first to pivot, to an online counseling. But quite immediately, they realized that the clientele has shifted, moving from, the more elder, senior kind of clientele to a younger group. And so quite quickly, you see that their interpretation or perception of what is their customer segment, what they need to be centricity about, what centricity is about, really has to shift along with the pandemic. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Hardi, can we have your take on what does it mean for citizens? I mean, you're very government hat, right? So citizen-centric services, what does it mean?
Well, I think if you look at it in the Singapore heritage sector, digital stuff has always been something that gave access to to members of public, and people have been very receptive so far. But I think with the pandemic and with the circuit breaker, especially last year, we find that our museums had to close. Most of the countries have had to stay at home. So it's the first time that most people end up working from home, studying from home, for example. And so we had to really have to look at how we can pivot very quickly to really take things online, what we call turbocharge it, and put this content in a virtual sense, where we start moving our exhibitions virtual, looking at videos, Instagram filters, games, things like even campaigns. If you recall the Ramadan done last year, we even got the Ramadan campaign done online. And that's the reason why we do this, is because we're looking at heritage. It's really an inspiration that we can push a nation, especially in challenging times. And of course, at NHB, the folks at NHB, they're really passionate about how we can play this part. And during the circuit breaker, to make sure that the heritage is still accessible to people when they need it. Think of it as a nice, comforting cookie that you've got. You're still at home and you can enjoy it, while the museums are running at limited capacities, for example.
I know. And in these times, actually, for me, going to the museums is actually like a nice breath of fresh air, because it's good space, but you still you're right, that touch of connectedness to the people. Okay, so Malcolm, what does citizen-centric innovation mean for you? And
So I think we talk about customers, I think expectations have shifted. And I think I heard turbocharge and speed. So I think this speed and responsiveness as an expectation has shifted. People have always been kind of impatient, for failure of a better word, but it's gotten more aggravated. So there's more emphasis on being proactive, minimizing. So that puts strain on organizations to be able to react faster and to be able to innovate quicker. So I think time to value, speed to market. And that's why I think a lot of organizations are investing in technology in terms of collaborative tools, the new digitalization, how we interact. So that in itself has shifted customer expectations, I believe, to be a bit quicker. And they expect you to be more proactive and more responsive. Because of those pivots, we're all getting used to that word. But I think how we react now has to be faster for that kind of volatility. And that expectation is increased. You can't make them wait as long as they wanted to before. And you need to almost predict in terms of their behavior and understand that better. I think that's always been an expectation, but I feel that's gotten more aggravated post-COVID. And with that, that's why organizations are investing a lot in digitalization. That will increase the speed and expectations, but the organizations have to catch up in that aspect as a macro. It means we have to be able to react faster, have our collaborative tools. We can't whiteboard anymore when crisis comes. We have to figure out how to use those tools and then make those decisions just as quickly, given that situation.
Since I have you, Zendesk has always been in the CRM space, this customer-centric space. How do we look at the world, or Singapore, if I look at a bit smaller, as customers, and how do we shift, or what must we do to shift our relationship as businesses or as entities in relation to our target audience?
So I think the key point it boils down to is it boils down to understanding your customers or your citizens in that sense. And I think that there's a lot of data points out there, and I think we're building up the models and we're trying to knock down silos. So we need to have easier systems to interact with. We need to understand the behaviors of customers. And that also helps in prediction. I mean, I think Trace Together, how it's gotten smarter in the way. I think those are data points being used on a daily basis or an hourly or a minute. I don't know the back end of it. But basically, if you look at the learning curve, I believe that's how they've utilized data very quickly. And there's a question about transparency and how that works. So at the end of the day, using data points to improve processes and how we get better at interaction with customers is the key point, I think, whether it be customers or citizens, that's becoming more and more the expectation. And you can see it on the other side when it breaks down, right? Like things like when silos come into play. The example I can give you is I was with a financial institution. I've had a relationship with them for many years. And I like that now with SingPass you can integrate. So they'd actually sent a marketing message to me, so that's marketing, asking me to change, but they haven't done a credit review on me in a while. So I said, sure, whatever. I throw in, opt in, happy about the SingPass, pretty quick process. But a day later, they call me and say, I have a different address. So I'm like, oh, okay. So why don't you just check with the other side there? Because I have another relationship. I have a loan with you, but like, oh, that's a different division and business unit. I can't do that. So can you send me a physical statement? And I'm like, so I'm going to send you a letterhead of your organization to you to verify that my address that is coming from you. And so silo and disjointed, that is somewhat disappointing because at the end of the day, I can see then they know it's the same organization. But at the end of the day, because that information is obviously siloed, maybe for privacy reasons or whatnot, as an expectation as a customer, you have to understand me. You've asked me from your marketing. I've done what you needed to do, but now you kind of disservice me. So I'm saying that when we interact with an organization, it has to be one entity to some extent, and you have to understand me as an individual to some extent. That's becoming more and more the expectation. And then if you can't do that, that's aggravating as a customer. And it may sound simple, but it's a small thing. And so I think that expectation should be. And so you need to understand those behaviors across your departments and integrate things so that you can interact with customers as one entity.
I agree. Bruce, I'm going to put you in a spotlight. I mean, I know you were talking about, no, because you guys, I think he raised a really valid point, and I'm saying that because you have a lot of services in what you do in NCSS in your own work. How has tech or just the way you guys been doing things and re-engaging people shifted, or what needs to shift for your sector?
Okay, so I suppose I want to carry over Malcolm's point, right, about having almost what you say, a 360 view of clients, in this case, our service users. So that is also starting to shift. You know, I know we are hindered by PDPA and all that, right? So there's a lot of cautiousness around what kind of information we should share. But I think increasingly, I think along with all the shifts, right, with the use of SingPass and all that, MyInfo, I think the clients themselves are quite aware that actually there is enough control in place, that they are in control of what information can be shared. I think in that case, as long as the service gives them the assurance that they are in control, that the information, even when it's transferred from one entity to another, is safeguarded because everybody abide by the same standards, be it PDPA or either cybersecurity system standards, that would greatly improve the customer experience. So I guess from a people and process standpoint, that has to change, even though the technology is already there. So that would help. The other thing, of course, is along with customer experience, they do expect services to be rendered quickly. Now that, with everything else, even the hawkers and the seniors are using Pay Now and all they're using QR codes. I think the social service agencies also have to toe that line, in a sense that, it's no longer physical anymore. We expect vouchers, physical verifications. That probably has to change as well, and of course, along with that, again, just back to the customer centricity, we should also take note that clients are not all equal. They are at different stages of digital literacy. So then whatever technology that we introduce, whatever data tools we introduce, have to cater to the spectrum of our clients.
So NHB, to put Hardi now in the spotlight, you guys have always been kind of, in the last few years, even before the pandemic, you guys have kind of been going more phygital, right? I particularly like the one at the National Museum where we get to use RFID tags to interact. My kids loved it too. So I thought that was really great in kind of using tech to kind of engage. But also, and now that you guys are talking about data points, you must be collecting a lot of data points from people's responses there. How is, really NHB's journey in terms of going phygital? What kind of impact has that had, and what is the trajectory for you guys in a traditionally very physical space, right, of museums and artifacts and paintings and such?
I think the digital experience is something that people might get to be quite used to. For example, it combines about 60% of the physical experience. So we are not going to replace the museums. You still need to come to us. You need to experience it firsthand. We do move 40% of that online onto digital means. And that 40% can also be a new realm where you can actually expand some content, also extend engagement to the audience itself, so that you can also look at targeting overseas potential visitors beyond our borders, which are not able to come to Singapore during this period. But I think with the digital experience, I think what's important, what you don't see behind, and this is also just pulling off what Malcolm and Bruce has mentioned, is for the heritage sector, what we have started to do is to really build a profile of each visitor that comes to us. So it's just like how we get to see a bank viewing its customers. We're doing the same with our visitors. Now, the reason we do that is because we want to know our customers better, or KYC, so that we can deliver very good end-to-end personalized visitor experiences. And this is done through, from the day that you just decide that, hey, I would like to check out a museum, I've got something interesting, to the day if you ever come down to the museum, and the day after that, where you see that, hey, I would like to get more information on what I've actually looked at, I visited, I want to Google more stuff. And that's what we do. And we do that by leveraging some of the tools that's already out there. I think one thing that really resonate with is what Malcolm mentioned, is the use of the national digital identity capabilities like SingPass, MyInfo, and we are incorporating this into our chatbots. So in the past, when you have the need to fill up information, buying a ticket over the counter, we are actually now channel migrating a lot of our visitors across to the digital realm. Today, you buy a chatbot, buy a ticket from our chatbot. You don't buy it online over the counter. We do still have counter stuff, but we want to be able to understand who you are, and through electronic transactions, to understanding what you've purchased, what you visited, and so on. We actually build a profile of yourself, and this allows us to push the right content in the right space of time, and also at the right level to our visitors. And that's where this helps us to build that total digital experience, which is unique to that particular visitor. So to answer your question, I think the digital experience is just a first start for us to get into the eyeballs of our visitors. But the data that you have, the way how we handle the data and use that to profile you, to know who you are better, is something that you don't really see. And it's something that we've already started doing for the last 1 year. And it's actually helping us, because I think moving towards Singapore as a smart nation, the use of machine learning, AI, and also data analytics, I think that is something that we need to really focus on.
So
Sorry.
Yes. So
can
actually,
I ask Hardi a question?
Yes, Ken. I was just going to ask if you guys had.
Because that triggered a thought, because Hardi talked about museums, right? Museums is all about nostalgia. right? And I'm not sure how much of that nostalgia you can convey, over a laptop or a tablet. And I imagine also, back in the day, a lot of seniors, they organize tours, to the museums, and they may not be so tech savvy. They may not be comfortable interfacing with a device to, again, feel that nostalgia through a museum visit. How did you manage to overcome, if any, some of these? Yeah.
Okay, so before you answer him, I was going to ask the question. So it's very timely because I'm going to say that, there are clearly two sectors here, right? Bruce talked about the young and the elderly, and I want to address those two sectors quite separately. But I think since we have you in the spotlight, Hardi, and he's right. How do you cater to, I think, the whole sector that's still very keen to do more physical kind of visits, people who are not as tech savvy? How are you guys ensuring that gap is filled?
Okay, so maybe I'll take that question into two parts. Today, I think majority of our visitors today, they're the age range, they're really the youngsters, the youth. They really come to the museum, they love this stuff. They find it, of course, they come in as part of the schools, that is schools-based learning programs. But in such also because it's the need to be able to learn more, be able to interact. It's something that we see a very growing trend within our youth. But that said, we also have seniors. And seniors is also very interesting because they come in, they have a different mindset. They're looking at nostalgia. You're right with that. They're not very familiar with tech, but they are very keen to see how they can learn. And how we have done this is we have actually broken our user archetypes into broad groups. And I'm going to touch on the seniors because I think something that you guys are quite keen to look at. So in the National Museum, we are today in the process of exploring how to create a smart association space. And this means that giving the same level of nostalgia to a senior who's never touched most probably AR, VR, they don't know what's that. They've got most probably a mobile phone, which they have used ThinkPass before. They've most probably grabbed right. But being able to get them to have that experience to the use of cutting edge technology. So some of the stuff that we are doing, and we hope you should be able to see it by next year once we've called a tender and have it built in place in the National Museum, is bringing the physical space directly to these distinct groups. And how we do this is by using things like simple 5G, high-speed connectivity, using gaming technologies to give what we call fused virtual reality or immersive experiences. So without that typical headpiece, you can still do this today, using audio-visual sensory experience for them to be able to experience it. So in doing so, what it means is that we actually are able to then give a senior who is not very familiar with tech, the new tech experience, get them interested, but also using the content and the nostalgic components to still give them something that they remember. So if you remember Post Bank in the past, it's called Post Office Savings Bank. We still can show you what's a POSB, for example, savings booklet. But at the same time, seniors can then remittance it now today. And I think this is something that we thought that it can be done. And also with the use of, for example, like machine learning, AI, and data analytics, this gives us the additional boost. So to what Bruce has mentioned, getting information from the customer, right? So while the seniors tend to engage in some of this new tech, new physical experience, we also collect data points from them. And of course, non-identifiable, but it gives us to know which are the specific attractions, capabilities, or interest points that they like. And this allows us to then create better experiences over time.
Malcolm, you guys have always been in this customer service space, so I want to pick your brain. What kind of data points are we looking at that would be useful or is most useful? Maybe two questions. What is the most surprising data point that has been interesting for you in terms of shaping customer experiences, right? That's one. But two, what are the data points that you feel we should pay attention to more of?
So it's kind of a tricky question because it kind of depends, right? So on the example that Hardi kind of gave and you're asking around, I think one of the areas you can also focus on, and I'll use the vaccination process. Nowadays, we're getting used to proactive engagement prior to you reaching the venue so that we can be more efficient and seamless in your transition into whatever it is you're going to enact. So it could be, if you understand the profile of the person, you could proactively engage them before they even get to the venue with things like this. So that kind of thing, I think, is one of the things I wanted to mention in terms of the process of the way we engage. Like you can fill out pre-forms, you could you could create a more seamless experience, or you can engage proactively. So I think having those data points also, depending on how you pick that on the customer's journey, is one point I wanted to make. I think that generally, to be honest, it comes as no surprise that customer expectations, even prior to COVID, were already declining, meaning that the satisfaction rate, while it is sort of held stable as a KPI, is actually declining in terms of expectations. So while we talk about what they call satisfaction metrics, our data shows that actually the number, while the satisfaction high, is not the same as customer expectations. So what they expect and when you measure what you're measuring are two different things to some extent. So while they are satisfied, it doesn't necessarily mean they are also happy, which means that then we have to figure out how to engage with them different. One of the more surprising things we found today is that we talk about efficiency in terms of support, and we found that customers actually want to talk to you longer. So while it means that, so maybe it's also things are getting more complex, so it takes longer for you to interact with a customer. When we talk about interactions, we want shorter because that means you're more efficient in theory. But actually what we're finding is customers want to speak to you longer. So what that means then is there needs to be a hybrid, because you can't keep hiring people to manage this necessarily. You need to have a hybrid of digital experiences to some extent that may be automated to some extent or semi-automated. You need to have some of self-service areas so that you can improve that personal high touch. So I think there's this stigma that says that robots and bots and things like this will replace humans. It's actually not the case. You will redeploy some. And again, it boils down to understanding the customer and what transactions are simple, what are complex, and what require high touch. So things like financial things tend to require more high touch, or museums tend to require more high touch. But we all Google things, right? So if to be honest, I don't necessarily want to go see a doctor. So technically, I usually Google things first and say, does this look so severe that I need to go see a doctor? And we have telemedicine. So we're slowly now segmenting. From before, we would just go to the doctor, right? We just say, okay, you're not well, you go to the doctor. Now you Google, you check. So that's just a case in point saying, depending on how complex I think my situation is, I will engage accordingly. So now I think organizations need to optimize that balance because it differs for all kinds of people, right? But again, understanding those behaviors and to Hardi's point, looking at data points of how we engage those people will allow you to optimize for that. So I think using data points like that is what we usually look at because it's a question between that efficiency. And Bruce also said, not all customers are built equal. So as you get closer and closer to that sort of hyper personalization, then that's what CRMs and data points will enable you to do over time. And then you keep iterating. So I think experimentation, evolution, and then reiterating and looking at the points. And there's a lot of good examples of that in government, from Trace Together to what I just mentioned in terms of that engagement, the processes that we do.
Yeah, can I use an example from social service? Because Malcolm said something that caught my attention, is that customers want to talk longer. And that's very true. When people call crisis lines and hotlines, maybe it's because of COVID, that everybody's mental health is a bit affected, right? So, they do want to talk longer, but the number of counselors and be it volunteers or paid staff is finite. So we wouldn't want a case where, just because we want to talk, they hot the line and somebody who is in a real crisis calls and cannot get through, right? So using AI, using chatbots, that helps to triage some of these. If you are low risk and just want to keep engaging, we could either, keep you on the chatbot or route you to a less experienced counselor, for example, who can then be that listening ear for you, while the more experienced ones are dealing with the actual crisis, people that are on the verge of suicide, for example. And that's a very important element, in order to prevent, further disasters in that sense. So yeah, I thought that's a good example that Malcolm brought up.
I mean, Cliff, last year's word, I think in 2020, the whole word last year was pivot, or the pivot this and pivot that, right? And this year it seems the word seems to be hybrid. Everybody's going to this whether there's a hybrid word like phygital, or hybrid space where you do work from home and so on and so forth. I think how if I just look at the word, the hybridization of the work that you guys do, how has that changed today as compared to like a year ago? Has there been significant shifts? I know that the pandemic is not we say it's a long period of time, but really it's not in the scheme of things. And yet in this 1 year, a year and a half, a lot has happened. How has your organization, or how has the work that you do actually shifted most significantly in terms of how you engage your customers in the last year and a half? Anybody want to go first?
Maybe I'll try that.
Okay.
So I think with the museums itself, the hybrid work environment, I mean, for us, most of us have been working from home for quite some time. While our museums still run, we do operate at either 25-50% capacity based on what the MTF has recommended. But what's important here is that the hybrid environment, I think, will stay. And moving forward, I think one of the big lessons we learned is really, and Singapore is actually quite tough in terms of labor. With the growing number of the silver hair generation, it's also tough for us to actually look at some of the tasks where you have it's still manual and requires quite a bit of touch. So one of the things that I think with moving forward in the hybrid environment is how we can have this very good fine balance between using the tech to support some of our staff to be able to do things better, take less amount of time, making sure that people are more effective. And at the same time, when we look at centralization, so centralization in terms of tech, where some of these tools, some of the stuff that you have out there, where you have a lot of these separate systems, can we centralize them to make sure that they are used much more simply? And we're taking the opportunity to also rationalize, to utilize them, to make sure that whatever is being done, it's actually also relevant. So one of the things that I think it's a big learning experience for us is really looking at how we take through the visitor journey. And in this hybrid environment, we see that having to take a ticket, for you to book a ticket or tour, it's never going to be the same. You're not going to come over to the museum and book it over the counter today. We see that eventual change when people will travel migrate up to maybe 80 to 90, even 100% over time, to just do it over chatbot or just do it online.
I mean, you guys have always been on the online space, right? Because Zendesk is like a tech backend. How do you guys then marry backwards? What kind of physical experiences what kind of hybrid experiences do you merge with the work that you do actually?
Actually, I think hybrid has kind of made us better in some ways. I mean, it's everybody's always talked about digitalization, but it wasn't really necessary. And now it's kind of forced itself upon. I mean, I think we can engage more audiences. There's opportunity for that. I think there's a lot of positives that come from this digitalization as we adjust. I mean, obviously we're going through a learning curve period, but I think that the hybrid model will be better. I mean, case in point, these conferences can reach out to more people. I'm getting used to standing in front of my camera or whatever. I mean, I used to do physical face-to-face ones, and then I kind of miss the feedback you get from the audience talking to a static screen or telling jokes to a screen, but you get used to these things. So I think we're on this process. I think what's important then will be the collaborative tools that we use going forward. I mean, there's a lot of new like whiteboarding tools for brainstorming, but I think we also have to remember the physical stuff that we kind of took for granted. And what I mean by that is those interaction points, or it means being a little bit more deliberate, I guess, in scheduling time with your people and not talking about work, because we're so used to doing that. And that's that kind of like coffee talk, right? We don't do those anymore, because once you get onto a call or a Zoom, you're like, oh, what's the issue? What do we need to solve? And then nobody asks, hi, how are you? How are your children? What's going on? Like, so I mean, these little things, I think we will start to learning curve and move new together with. And I think we've done that. I mean, when I first started with Zoom, it was just like back to back to back, scheduling times in between, like 15-minute breaks, all those little pragmatic things. I think we're moving through that process. I think also it makes us smarter in terms of this digitalization. And Hardi made the point, and I was talking about how the processes are, right? It'll be more optimized for space now, because what you've done is you can see the number before they get there as opposed to walk-ins, right? I'd even argue some of the restaurants, while they're working through the capacity issues, they seamlessly make the processes work as the changes come. So if you look at it from as at to where we are now, there have been some improvements. I mean, we keep getting curveballs in terms of the numbers. And the first times when the restaurants, they just couldn't manage it, they closed. Now they're just quicker, right? In terms of, okay, we're ready, you got no more temperature check now, but you've got this, we've got the vaccination, you've got machines that tap. We used to talk about this stuff and it took us years to implement. We've done it now in 2, right? You just a lot of this technology that's gotten implemented. And so I feel that it's kind of made us better. And I think the hybrid will continue and will continue to evolve very quickly. And that's what I'm optimistic about. I think processes will get quicker, changes that happen will get faster. And we're working through that volatility. And I think the learning curve is quite apparent. So.
I mean, a lot of the I guess, Zendesk customers would be, you're kind of looking at human data points, but I'm swinging to NCS as your customers are not just one singular human being, right? They're also organizations and institutions, for a lot of them. How as an agency as a whole, do you plan to reach out to these kind of entities for better collaboration, implementation, digitalization, and all the other tech good stuff that we've been talking about today?
You're right, Cherie. We don't have direct customers. We don't interface with customers directly. You can imagine the SSAs are the ones that interface with them. So where the role we play really is an enabler. We build capability and capacity. So I think one of the things that was born out of the pandemic really is the sector digitalization. My office essentially it's only 1 year old. I mean, because of all the things that need to happen at the pace that it needed to happen. So we set up this thing called Tech and Go, a one-stop tech hub. And really it helps SSA tackle the two themes of digitalization, which is technology and talents. And then we take a very simple frame of build, buy, and borrow. We avail funds, we avail consultancy, we avail even training courses for people to either build technology or build in-house capabilities. That's one. Buying as well. We talk about some of those things like Zendesk, for example. You can typically adopt something like them as a platform as a service, software as a service, and SSAs can buy that because they come with a lot of best practices already. So if we talk about citizen centricity, how's the best way of viewing customers, they typically come with some of these in place. They can borrow a lot, and then talk about borrow as well, right? Borrow lessons, best practices from the commercial side and apply it to the social side because a lot of them are relevant. And clearly, and I'm not shy to say that, the commercial side tends to be a little bit ahead in some of these things. So that helps. So we do a lot of outreach, but end of the day, I think what is most important is we need to help the agencies see value in doing this. If it's a hybrid, we talked about hybrid earlier. Is there value in hybrid? If they hold on to the mindset that, high touch is still better, then it's very hard for them to change and convert. So change management is important as well. And we help them see some of these things. I hope that answers the question you were asking.
Yes, I'm going to play a small game with the three of you, okay? So I can see your hands on the screen. So I'm going to ask you guys to just kind of show all at the same, because I'm trying to figure out how to do this so that all three don't I wait for what Malcolm says and then what Bruce says. Okay, you're going to use by way of your hand, kind of show me what do you think the trajectory for innovation and technology and digitalization is going to be moving forward? Is it going to kind of stagnate? Is it going to go down or is it going to go up? And if it's going to go up, it could be like that. It's going to be like, real trajectory. Is it very, very gentle? What's it going to be? Okay. So on 3, okay, I'm going to give you 5 seconds to think about your answer. Because, whatever your answer, I'm going to ask you anyway. So, all right. In 1, so either it's, just really the angle in which you think the trajectory of digitalization and adoption is going to be. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's interesting. So we have two kind of it's kind of like, I don't know if it's a hockey stick, and then Bruce is kind of yeah, it's improved, but we're going to stagnate a little bit. We'll get to Bruce last. So we're going to start with Malcolm. So you've always been in the space. So tell me why you think it's going to be, is it a hockey stick trajectory? We see in what the startups like, what do we think innovation adoption is going to be?
So it's going to be pretty steep, I feel. And the reason is, one, I think there's a lot of disruption happening that resets that customer benchmark. So, look, I'll give you an example that the ride hailing industry shifted taxis. You've also we didn't start looking at customer satisfaction, the 5-point stars, until they came around. So expectations will continue to reset because new benchmarks because of disruptors. That's one reason. The other reason is what we found last year in a study we did is there's a lot of investment in tech now happening. And the difference, though, is it's no free lunch because the time to value is faster, meaning that they need you to do it faster. So implementations that used to take years will now take months, possibly weeks. We talk about agile all the time, right? There's a lot of agile groups, and that's what they're working on. Tech is the easier one to buy the solution, then figure out how to integrate it. So I think these two macro elements are what's going to push a lot of the innovation, so to speak, both disruption of the external, customer expectations that will continue to change due to that new benchmark, and then that there is an investment. This is what they're looking at, how we build that out. And there's a lot of efficiency gain to be made, and this is not something new. This has been talked about for many years, that we wanted to, you can't just keep hiring labor and headcount, right? And case in point, we're having shortages across, so efficiencies and things, and the tech is sort of the answer to that. So that's why I feel there's going to be a lot of investment in that area to kind of ease the situation.
Okay, Hardi, you have a similar trajectory to Malcolm.
Well, I think for the government agencies, we do have a digital government blueprint where we want to be at. You can Google that. But I think importantly, we look at specific matrices. And for us, especially, we look at electronic transactions. I think Malcolm did mention the prevalence of having people tap and go, for example, PayWave, right? In the past, something wasn't very familiar with, even aunties did them today or uncles did them today. So with that push for electronic transactions, and also be able to use folks stuff like SingPass, Mine for pre-filling forms, basic authentication, which today, over the last 1 year, people are able to use SingPass, trace together very quickly to be able to authenticate themselves. So that game changes in place today allows us to do that. I wouldn't say really a turbocharge, but I would say it's a very nice gradual shift in terms of adoption. If you compare to booking tools out there within the region, you're looking at about 30 to 40% in the past, before COVID, when you book your tickets online, Agoda, stuff like that. But moving forward, I think we can look at a better adoption rate, maybe between 60 to 70%. But it will be progressive, because I think what's important is the reach that you need to achieve. So with COVID itself, when you're working in a hybrid environment, you're forced to use your mobile phones and devices. I think that will be I would say the motivator for you to move forward.
Hey, Bruce, you had kind of like trajectory, but I'm not sure. Unpack that for us.
Okay, yes. I'm sure we've seen digitalization and all this moving at hyperspeed in the past year. And that's true. And even for our sector, right, social service sector, I think we've seen tech adoption, increase by 4 times compared to the year before, or at the start of 2020. But I'm just worried, there is a, and really the tech adoption, we're talking about commercial off the shelf, for the efficiency or productivity that Malcolm mentioned. So those are low hanging fruits. But going forward, as we have, covered the baseline, the next step could be innovation, could be more customized and bespoke solution. So the intensity, perhaps, or even the investments needed may be a bit more than what we have been doing today. I'm just afraid there could be fatigue, in terms of digitalization rollout. That's one. The talent needed is also maybe lacking as well. So you need a bit more specialists, and not just a normal project manager. And finally, of course, when it comes to investment, we are a social service. We rely on donations, charitable funds. And if, funders, donors don't feel that there is a real need or benefit that can be reaped, that has a direct impact on the end consumer or end client, then that's also going to be difficult to convert, donor mindsets to enable some of these SSAs to pump more investments to innovations, particularly in terms of digitalization and customer-centric kind of technology.
Okay, another good question for you guys. This, if you are very positive and optimistic. This, of course, if you're like very pessimistic and like shit's not going to happen. Or this, if you're cautiously like, okay, I think we're going to middle ground, but we're not sure. But you can kind of toggle up your thumb. Questions, you gentlemen, are you ready with your thumbs? Okay, you guys got to do this so that no one gets an advantage or disadvantage. Okay, great. Your purview of the next, I guess for your organization, your vantage point in the next 5 years, is it positive, negative? What is it? 1, 2, 3, go. Very good. Everyone's positive. Hardi's like extremely positive. So we're going to start with you, Hardi. We're going to close off soon. So I know I'm glad you're really hopeful, because one, you wear a very government hat, and that's always helpful for a lay person to see that the public sector is in a positive and optimistic space. But share with us why you're so optimistic about the future of citizen-centric innovation and digitalization.
Well, we can say that I think one thing with COVID stuff and also this new this hybrid environment, agility and success factors today, we have having a good plan in place. I think you should be able to achieve more. Also, because if you look at it today, with the move towards a digital experience, the digital space interest has also grown quite a fair bit. So one thing with in Singapore, capability development is very important. This allows us to then look at ways how we can educate and facilitate the acquisition of digital skill sets, which is needed for sectorial growth. And I think today our kids and also the folks out there, being able to tap onto this new experiences drives the demand in terms of having to look and see how they can learn and also improve themselves. I think that's very important, because I think having to look at a good education and also a good roadmap forward in terms of getting people to look at adoptions, look at ways in terms of how they can upskill and upgrade themselves. I think that's where I think will be the next step in terms of giving that push forward to get success in place, or at least over the next 2 years.
All right, Bruce.
Okay, so I suppose thanks to COVID and all that, the baseline in terms of the receptiveness of technology has lifted. Everybody, citizens, from citizens to board members, all have lifted. So that is a very positive sign. So I mean, short of using the overused word that we have a plan, and having a plan is a starting point, right? So we have a plan, so that's good. But that said, a lot of pieces have come together. The community has come together. So I mentioned earlier, we need to build, buy, or borrow. I mean, there's a limit to what we can buy because funds are limited and all that. So really, I also like to take this opportunity to encourage, our community partners, from the private sector and from other sectors, right, to come together and help us, uplift the whole sector. And I think that in itself, it's a powerful message that we need to continue to say. And I think we have also seen, philanthropy, volunteerism coming up, and that itself is a very important ingredient. And I'm hopeful that that will continue.
Okay, Malcolm.
It's kind of all been said, but if I was to sum it up, I mean, I think we're on a good foundation. I think the technology is available. I think the data is also available to some extent, and we have smart people. And as Bruce just mentioned, we have partners. I think there's more and more collaboration in the world as we tackle some of this volatility and the changes together. So I'm really hopeful that things are changing, and they're changing in a good way. And especially given what we forget is the past, how slow things used to be. To some extent, we are now faster, I feel, and the learning curves are quicker. So I think given that, I'm very optimistic of the future.
Okay, one last thing, just want to ask all of you it's a personal question I ask a lot of the people that I get to spend time with. What is, on a personal level, what is the one thing that you will invest time and money in for yourself in the next 2 years, the next year or so? Malcolm, what is the one thing you would invest time and money in?
Trying to get more human element in. I think I miss that element because there's a lot more interaction virtual. And even me time. So I think that now we work a lot more given that it's virtual, because we're not commuting, we're not doing those things. And I think we need to find that balance. That's part of that learning curve. So I'm trying to commit to that, and that whether that means using apps that help me breathe or listening to my Apple Watch a little more, I'm not so sure. So that kind of thing, I think that me time.
Now, Bruce, what is the one thing you would invest in?
For me, it's probably building relationships. I think with the virtual, professional relationships, even not just personal relationships. I think we like the depth, and I really miss all the interactions we have had. And clearly, I don't go in, all altruistic, but clearly, if I could have a lot more relationships and in-depth relationships, I can hopefully get and mobilize, more community partners together and really do more for the sector.
Thank you. Hardi, last words.
I think I'll take a different track. I think the most important thing is health. That's very important. All that Zoom time and all the other work they're doing at home, both of them, it's not healthy. We should really look at exercise, keeping fit, and really keeping people happy. And at the same time, also encouraging the staff and also people around you to do so. I think that gives you a nice holistic view, especially when we start going into this hybrid environment.
Thank you.
You look fit, Hardi. You look fit to me, buddy.
Thank you, guys. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, everybody who's joining us over Zoom or whatever platform you guys are engaging us in. Thank you to our panelists, to our audience, and we have a session right after this, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cherie. Thanks, Hardi. Thanks, Bruce. Take care.